My true story from Tennessee. I hosted my 70th birthday party. No one showed up. That same day, my Dill posted family photos from a resort with her parents. I didn't cry, I just smiled. And when they got home, I handed them the envelope that changed everything. My grandson's DNA test results. It was nearly 8 p.m. The buttercream frosting had started to sag. The candles flickered on the kitchen table, 9 small ones and a single tall gold taper in the center. 70. Not that anyone asked. I had made the cake myself. Old family recipe, buttermilk, vanilla, a touch of lemon zest. The kind you only make when you expect company. I had even set the table, linen napkins, the crystal glasses, my late husband's favorite teacups, all for a dinner no one came to. The roast was cold, the potatoes had hardened at the edges. I had reheated the gravy twice, just in case. At 5 p.m., I straightened the silverware. At 6 p.m., I checked the doorbell. At 7, I told myself there had probably been traffic. By 8, I could not lie to myself anymore. I picked up the cordless phone from its base and dialed Richard, my only son. He picked up on the 3rd ring, sounded distracted, then irritated. "What? You're calling again." I cleared my throat. "I was just wondering if maybe you forgot what day." He cut me off. "Oh, right, the birthday of the house witch." Then he chuckled. 70, you should be sleeping underground by now instead of wasting our electricity." The line went dead. I sat back in the chair. The gold candle still burned. I did not cry. I did not move. My knees ached, but I stayed where I was. I looked around the table, each place set with care, each plate empty. The silence rang louder than any insult ever could. The kitchen lights buzzed above me. I turned them off, one by one. Left the cake untouched, picked up the envelope from my handbag, the one with 2 sets of initials, and I waited. Because they were coming home from the resort tomorrow, and I was done being wallpaper. I turned on the TV, just for the noise. It synced automatically to my phone, and the screen lit up with Facebook. Melissa's profile popped open, the last person I wanted to see, but there she was. Her latest post loaded, the images large and glossy across the flat screen. A new album. Family Getaway, Gatlinburg Weekend, 84 photos. Her, Richard, little Sammy, and her parents, tanned, smiling, wine glasses in hand, matching swimsuits, designer sunglasses, coordinated outfits like some magazine spread. And the caption? 3 generations, family that matters. No mention of me. No call, no text, no seat at the table, not even a name in the tag. In one photo, Sammy sat on Melissa's father's lap, both of them laughing. In another, Richard leaned against a balcony rail, arms around his wife and in-laws. I looked at that picture longer than I should have, not because I was jealous. I just wanted to see if he looked happy. He didn't. I knew that balcony. They had been there before, just not with me. Never with me. I muted the TV. The flicker of the slideshow on the screen still reflected on the window pane beside me. Outside, the street was quiet. The neighbor's dog barked once, then silence again. I stood up slowly, the arthritis in my hips reminding me of every step. I walked to the dining table, picked up each plate one by one, and carried them to the sink. I did not rinse them yet. I just could not bear the sound. I placed the untouched cake in the fridge, closed the door, then opened it again and took out the envelope I had tucked between the butter and the berry jam. I held it for a moment. The initials stared back at me. R.A.T. for Richard Allen Thompson, and S.M.J. for Samuel James Thompson. But that was the problem. Only one of those was true. I ran my thumb along the seal of the envelope. It was thick. Too thick for just a birthday card. That was the point. I sat back down at the kitchen table, now dark and cleared. I placed the envelope in the center. Then I turned off the last light. 70. Not a soul came to say it. But I was no longer afraid of their silence. I was learning to speak through it. And I waited. Because the truth was patient. Because tomorrow they would walk through that door again, pretending the world had not shifted. And I would hand them the truth with the same calm they had handed me, invisibility. Because I was done being wallpaper. Melissa never called me by my name. Not Mom. Not even Mrs. Thompson. just snide little titles that sliced deeper than she knew. "You just hang around like bad wallpaper," she sneered once while folding laundry I had washed. "Always there, always peeling at the corners." That one stayed with me. But it was not the worst. Once, when Sammy was a toddler, I picked him up because he had a fever. He clung to me, calling out in baby speak, just needing comfort. Melissa snatched him from my arms like I was poison. "He calls me Mama, not some doddering old hag playing Grandma." She looked me dead in the eye as she said it. Her voice was sweet, but her words were venom. Then there was the morning she found me in the kitchen, making breakfast for Richard before a job interview. I had slipped $200, 0 cents cash, into his coat pocket the night before, just in case. She saw it, pulled it out, waved it in my face. "Trying to buy his love now? You're a welfare tick with lipstick." I said nothing. I never did. I had lived through worse than her tongue. But silence does not mean weakness. It means storage. It means I am stacking every word you say, and one day you will trip on them. When Richard lost his job years ago, I used part of my late husband's pension to help them put a down payment on the house. My name was never added to the deed, though it was my money. When I asked Melissa, gently, whether we should update the paperwork, she said, "You didn't buy this house. You bought the right to crash here." Crash. That word hit harder than most, like I was a car wreck, a temporary mess they had to drive around. But I was not temporary. I was there when Sammy was born, sitting in the hallway with a lukewarm coffee while her mother got to be in the delivery room. I was the one who rocked him at 3 a.m. when Melissa was too drained. I was the one who took him to urgent care when he had croup, who held him while he vomited on my blouse, who sang "You Are My Sunshine" on repeat because no one else remembered the second verse. Yet, he did not look like Richard. That thought crept in slowly, a flicker at first, then it rooted deeper. Sammy had deep-set hazel eyes. No one in our family had them. His ears were wide at the base, his skin tone warmer, with a mole on his neck that I knew was not from our bloodline. I brushed it off for a while. Children can take after distant relatives. But then came the school paperwork. Blood type, AB. Richard was O, like me. Melissa had claimed to be A. I began writing things down. Not on a computer. I did not trust those. In a spiral notebook I kept in my knitting basket. Birth dates, medical notes, phrases Sammy repeated that Melissa said she had never taught him. I was not accusing. I was observing. Melissa once caught me staring too long at a photo of Richard as a boy. She smirked. "Still trying to find the resemblance? Let it go, Grandma. Genes skip losers." That night I cried into my pillow for the first time in years, not because I felt hurt, but because I felt used. I was not raising a grandson. I was raising a question. There was another clue, subtle but telling. Richard started staying out late, working overtime, but he never seemed happier, just drained. Melissa, meanwhile, had new clothes, new jewelry, and took more girls' weekends. When I asked how they were affording it, she laughed. "Not all of us retire into knitting and pity parties, sweetheart." Then she walked out in heels I knew cost more than my monthly pension. Still, I kept the peace. For Sammy. Always for Sammy. Until I realized I might not even have a rightful claim to him. I had given him my lullabies, my oatmeal cookies, my stories of Tennessee winters and honeysuckle summers, and he might not even carry a drop of my blood. But even that was not what broke me. What broke me was hearing Sammy ask one day, after I braided his hair, "Grandma, why does Mommy say you used to be nicer before you got old and stupid?" That night I went to my room, locked the door, and opened the drawer where I kept my quiet plans. I began preparing for the storm, not with shouting, but with science. It was a Friday afternoon when Richard called from work. He sounded tired but grateful. "Mom, could you pick Sammy up from school today? Melissa has an appointment, and I won't be home until 6. Of course, I said yes. I always did. I would walk barefoot through glass for my grandson. Or at least, the boy I had called my grandson. I arrived early, as always, picked up Sammy, gave him the apple slices he liked, and brought him home. But when I opened the front door with my spare key, something felt off. Too quiet. Sammy curled up on the couch with a book, and I headed upstairs to put away his backpack. That was when I heard the sound. Soft at first, then unmistakable. Laughter. Heavy breathing. The creak of a mattress, our master bedroom, Richard and Melissa's. I froze at the top of the stairs, my heart pounding. I told myself I was imagining things, that I had lived long enough to know better than to assume. But then I heard a voice, low, unfamiliar, male, and Melissa's giggle. My hand trembled as I pushed open the door. She did not scream right away. She gasped, her eyes locked with mine. She was on her back, tangled in the sheets, with a man whose face I had never seen. Tattoos snaked across his chest, down one arm, disappearing under the waistband of his jeans. "Get the hell out," she screamed, scrambling for the blanket. I stood still. The man bolted into the bathroom, muttering, "You said no one would be home." Melissa jumped out of bed and lunged toward me. "Don't you dare say a word," she hissed. Her hands shoved my chest, hard. I stumbled backward into the hallway, my hip crashing into the wall. I caught myself just before I fell completely, but the pain sparked through my side like lightning. She bent over me, her face inches from mine. "Say a word, and I'll say you slipped, because you're senile. Who do you think they'll believe? Me? A mother? Or a washed-up hag who cries over forgotten birthdays?" My mouth stayed shut, but my eyes didn't blink. They recorded everything. The tattoo on the man's left shoulder, a skull with roses, the shape of Melissa's necklace, one Richard had given her, the way her voice trembled, not with shame, but with fury. Then she turned and stormed back into the bedroom. I limped downstairs, clutching the banister with both hands. Sammy was asleep on the couch. I sat beside him, heart thundering, rage and sorrow warring in my chest. But I said nothing. Not to Melissa, not to Richard, not even to the boy. That night, after they left for dinner, Melissa claiming she needed air after such a stressful week, I walked upstairs again. Not into the bedroom, but into the hallway bathroom. That was when I saw it. The hallway security camera. A small motion sensor unit Richard had installed years ago, connected to a cloud account he never deleted. It had a perfect view of the upstairs hallway, including the moment Melissa rushed out of the bedroom, naked under a towel, and darted into the bathroom with a bundle of sheets. I opened the app on my tablet, logged in, and there it was. A 90-second clip. Melissa sprinting into the hall, clutching linens. The camera caught her dumping them into the bathtub, then returning a moment later with a plastic bag, what looked like a used condom inside, and spraying air freshener wildly over the bed. She did not know the camera still worked. I downloaded the footage and saved it to 2 drives, one physical, one cloud. Then I went back to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of cold tea, and stared at the calendar. Richard's birthday was next month. Sammy's the month after, and mine had just passed, uncelebrated. But I was done counting the years they forgot me. Now I would start counting evidence and patience. I waited until the house was empty. Richard had taken Sammy to the park, and Melissa was at yoga, which likely meant meeting that man again, the one with the skull tattoo and no wedding ring. I went upstairs with latex gloves and a steady hand. From Sammy's room, I plucked a few strands of hair from his pillow and placed them gently into a plastic zip bag. Then, from the bathroom, I took Richard's toothbrush, the green one he always used, the one Melissa hated because it looked too cheap. Downstairs, I sealed the evidence in an envelope and slid it into my purse. That week, I mailed them to a private lab I found 2 towns over. Not a big national chain, not one that would ask questions. I used a fake name. Bought a money order with cash, wrote in block letters, "Confidential, do not call, mail only." The days passed slowly after that. I kept my hands busy, knitting, baking, pruning the roses that Melissa never noticed were hers because I planted them. But my mind was a hawk. Melissa never checked it. She thought bills were bad for the skin. Richard was too busy, always working late. It was easy to intercept. 3 weeks after I sent the samples, the envelope arrived, plain white, no logo. I waited until I was alone. I sat at the dining room table, the same one I had set for my 70th birthday. Same linen runner, same lonely candle. The letter was short, just a simple statement at the bottom of the page, printed in black ink. No biological relationship found between sample A and sample B. I read it again, then a third time. My hands trembled, not with shock, but confirmation, a strange kind of relief, like a door that had been creaking for years had finally shut. I did not cry. Not because I was strong, but because I was tired of being surprised by betrayal. Sammy was not Richard's child. That meant Melissa had lied. Not once, not by accident, but for years. She had stolen more than trust. She had rewritten my son's future. And mine, with a smile. I printed 2 copies of the report. One I tucked away in a locked drawer, beneath my birth certificate and Richard's military flag. The other I folded into a thick ivory envelope, sealed it with a wax stamp I had not used since my husband's funeral, and wrote in black ink, "Only open if they forget." Then I placed it in my handbag, and I waited, because forgetting was something they were very good at. The sound of the garage door creaked open just past noon on Sunday. I was sitting in the same chair I had waited in 3 weeks earlier, the same lace tablecloth still spread, though the birthday cake had long since gone stale. The door burst open. Melissa walked in first, sunglasses perched high like a crown, a fresh tan coloring her skin. Behind her was Richard, lugging a suitcase. Sammy stumbled in last, dragging a stuffed bear with new resort tags. Melissa tossed her beach bag on the floor, then glanced at me with a smirk. "Oh, you're here?" she said, her tone syrupy. "Hope your party for one wasn't too depressing. I saw this adorable ad for senior socials at the rec center. You should look into it." I did not respond. I rose slowly, went to the hallway side table, and retrieved the envelope. "Richard," I said, holding it out, "please open this." He looked puzzled, then annoyed. "Now? What is it, another guilt trip?" "Just open it," I said again, my voice steady. "It is not for guilt, it is for clarity." He took the envelope and tore it at the top. Melissa stepped forward, suddenly alert. "Wait, what is that?" she asked, reaching for it. Richard pulled back. His eyes skimmed the first few lines. "This says, 'He's not my son?'" Melissa lunged. "You had no right!" she screamed, trying to snatch the paper from his hand. He held firm. Melissa's hands clawed at the air. "You went behind my back. You're just a bitter old woman with too much time." I looked at her, not with anger, not even with pity, just with the weariness of knowing too much. "I had every right," I said calmly. "I changed his diapers when you would not get up. I rocked him through fever nights. I sang him to sleep. I raised your boy like he was mine, and I carried the truth alone because I did not want to humiliate my son." Richard's face turned pale. His hands dropped to his sides. The letter slipped and landed on the floor like a confession. Melissa spun around to face him. "Richard, she's twisting everything. She's lying. That test, anyone could fake it." But Richard did not look at her. He looked at me. His voice cracked. "Mom, how long have you known?" "Since 3 weeks ago," I replied. "But I have known something was wrong for far longer. His blood type, his eyes, his laugh. It was never yours." "I cannot believe this," he whispered. Melissa's face contorted. "You're going to believe her? After everything I've given you? You think I cheated? That I would just, what, get pregnant and pretend?" "You just admitted it," I said, still calm. "And you did more than pretend. You lived a lie, and you dragged my son into it. You dragged Sammy into it." Melissa turned to me like a viper. "You just want to tear this family apart because you're jealous, because no one celebrated your stupid birthday," Richard interrupted her. "Enough, Melissa." His voice was low, firm. "You lied to me for 7 years, and you made her feel like garbage while doing it?" Melissa scoffed. "She is garbage. You would be nowhere if I hadn't pushed you." "She is my mother," Richard snapped, "and I let you treat her like furniture. No, like a ghost." There was silence. Even Sammy, too young to understand, seemed to feel the shift in the air. Melissa turned to storm off, but I said one final thing. "You threatened me once, Melissa. Told me no one would believe the word of an old woman." I stepped forward, but I believed myself. And now he does too. Melissa turned at the door, her face red and trembling. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You're right," I replied. "It is just beginning." And Richard picked up the phone. Richard made the call while still holding the envelope. His hands were shaking, but his voice was sure. I had not seen him this clear-headed in years. He gave the dispatcher our address, his name, and said calmly, "I need to report fraud. And I have evidence." While we waited, I opened the small metal lockbox I kept hidden in the back of my bedroom closet. Inside were not just the DNA results, but a thumb drive, a printed timeline, and 2 affidavits, one from my doctor verifying the bruising and swelling on my knee from the fall, and another from the urgent care physician who had stitched the gash on my palm after I broke my fall that Friday. There were also camera clips, Melissa in full view, wiping down the bedsheets with bleach, another of her tossing something, later recovered as a condom, into the guest bathroom trash. A third, from the hallway, showing her stepping over me, pausing just long enough to whisper, "Senile old bat," before slamming the bedroom door. I handed it all to Richard in a sealed manila envelope, his fingers curled around it like it weighed 100 pounds. An hour later, the police arrived. 2 officers. Calm, courteous. Melissa had locked herself in the upstairs bathroom. They gave her a choice: come down peacefully, or they'd come get her. She came down. In her resort romper and hotel slippers, sunglasses still perched atop her head like a mask of denial. "You're making a mistake," she said. "I'm a mother. I have rights." The officer glanced at the file Richard had handed him. "You, also, have a forged birth certificate, 2 insurance claims under false paternity, and over $18,000, 0 cents of taxpayer-backed benefits, in a private account under a fake LLC. You'll need to explain that." Melissa turned to Richard, her eyes wide, panicked now. "You believe her over me?" "I believe the evidence," he said, his voice hollow. "And I believe my mother," he added. Then quieter. "Finally." They cuffed her gently, gave her a jacket to cover up. As she passed me on the way to the cruiser, she hissed, "You've ruined everything." I met her eyes. "No, I revealed it." The front door closed behind them with a thud that felt like closure. Richard sat down on the bottom stair, his shoulders heavy. I sat beside him. He leaned his head against mine. "I was blind," he whispered. "I almost let her destroy you." I put my hand on his. "You were lied to. That is not the same." He shook his head. "I should have seen it. The way she spoke to you. The way she kept you out of everything. I thought it was stress. I thought you two just didn't get along. She made sure of that," I said. "But it does not matter now." He turned to me. "I'm sorry I laughed at your birthday. I'll never forgive myself for that." "You do not need to," I said. "You came back to me. That is enough." The investigation moved quickly. Melissa had created a shell identity for Sammy's paternity, filing paperwork listing Richard as the father, despite knowing the timeline did not match. She used this false documentation to claim family medical insurance, tax benefits, and supplemental child care stipends during Richard's years of unemployment. The total came to over $18,000, 0 cents. When confronted, she confessed, not out of remorse, but strategy. Her lawyer tried to argue for a reduced sentence on grounds of postpartum instability. It did not work. Richard filed for divorce. Full custody of Sammy was awarded to the biological father, who, surprisingly, turned out to be a man Melissa had also deceived. He showed up in court with tears in his eyes, holding a small stuffed animal from the last time he had seen his son. He thanked me. "You saved my boy from growing up in a lie," he said. I nodded. I had saved more than that. I had saved the last pieces of truth in this house. The night after the court ruling, Richard stayed for dinner, just him and me. I reheated pot roast. He washed the dishes. We did not speak much. We did not need to. When he left, he hugged me tighter than he had since he was a teenager. "I don't deserve you," he said. "You're wrong," I replied. "You came home, that is everything." The custody hearing was not easy. Richard sat on one side of the courtroom. On the other sat a man named Daniel Harper, a quiet, broad-shouldered man with dark circles under his eyes and a folder clutched to his chest. He was Sammy's biological father. When the DNA results were shared, Daniel didn't flinch. He had already known. Melissa had once told him she lost the baby, a cruel lie that robbed him of 5 years of fatherhood. Now he was here, and he wanted his son. Richard looked over at me during the recess. "I can't believe I raised someone else's child," he said. "You believed he was yours. You loved him like a father should. That is not something to regret, I said. Richard turned back toward Daniel. If he wants to be in his life, I won't stop him. It was a quiet, painful exchange. The court acknowledged Daniel's biological rights and granted him primary custody, with Richard retaining visitation. But it was mutual, respectful. No screaming, no resentment. Just two men trying to do right by a child who had been lied to by the only woman he called Mama. I stayed quiet through most of it, except when the judge asked about household ownership. My name was on the deed. Always had been. Melissa once claimed I was just renting a room by guilt, but the paperwork said otherwise. When we bought the home in 2001, I had contributed a large portion from my husband's life insurance. The deed listed me as co-owner, and now that Melissa was out of the picture, the house was finally, legally, emotionally mine. I stayed. Richard moved to a condo nearby. Wanted space to heal. I understood. The first thing I did was change the locks. Not out of fear, out of finality. Then I hired cleaners. We scrubbed every surface, replaced the worn carpet Melissa had insisted on, and painted the walls a soft almond white. I took down every photo that featured lies and hung new ones. My husband in uniform. Richard as a boy fishing on the lake. My own mother holding a pie with a crooked smile. Photos that felt like truth. In the living room, I placed a vase of yellow lilies, my husband's favorite. In the hallway, I hung a framed quote he used to keep in his wallet. Character is what you are when no one is watching. I was watching now. Richard came by the next Sunday, knocked even though he had a key. I opened the door and he held up a bag of groceries. Thought you might want some company. We sat in the backyard that evening. The air was thick with June honeysuckle. I poured sweet tea. He sat in the same chair his father used to read the paper in. I still think about him, Richard said, staring into the garden. So do I. He took a deep breath. I'm trying to be better. I know I was cruel. I know I ignored things I should have seen. You were surviving, I said. Now you are awake. He nodded. Sammy came by later that week with Daniel. The boy looked confused, quiet. He held a stuffed dinosaur under one arm. I met them at the door, knelt to his level and said, You've grown so much. He nodded. Do you remember the muffins we used to make? He smiled a little. Daniel thanked me. You didn't have to speak up. But you did. I waited until it mattered, I said. When they left, Sammy turned on the porch and waved. Not much, just a flick of the hand, but it was enough. That night I stood in the front yard, barefoot on the cool grass. The moon was full. The house behind me was quiet, clean, honest. For the first time in years, I did not feel afraid in my own home. I had lost a grandson, but I had found my son. 1 year later, the house felt different, not because it had changed, but because I had. The walls no longer listened for footsteps they feared. The kitchen no longer hesitated to boil water for one. And the front porch, oh that porch, finally held laughter again. Richard had met someone. Her name was Elena. She was warm, grounded, and came with a little girl named Lila, 5 years old, full of questions, curls, and crayons. They visited for dinner on a Saturday in spring. I had made roast chicken and sweet potatoes. Elena brought lemon pie. Richard set the table. Lila wandered the living room, her wide eyes taking in the photos. She paused in front of one, my wedding day, then turned and looked at me. Is that you? She asked, pointing. Yes, sweetheart, I smiled. That was a long time ago. She tilted her head. You look like a movie star, I laughed, a real laugh, one I hadn't let myself feel in years. When dinner was ready, Lila pulled out a chair next to mine, then stopped, looked up, and asked, Grandma, can I sit next to you? I froze. Just for a second, it was the word, Grandma. She said it like it belonged to me, not forced, not coaxed, not because someone told her to, because she saw me. I nodded, my voice thick in my throat. Yes, baby, you already did something special. You saw me. She climbed up beside me, chattering about school and her favorite cartoon. Elena and Richard exchanged glances across the table. I caught it, that quiet, content glance people give when something just fits. Later that night, when they left, Richard lingered at the door. She really likes you, he said. I like her too. He reached for my hand. Mom, thank you for everything. I didn't say anything, just squeezed his fingers. The moon was out again that night, but this time it did not feel like a reminder of what was missing. It felt like a promise of something healed. A year ago, I was alone at a birthday table no one came to. Tonight, I had chicken bones in the sink, juice rings on the table, and a little girl's drawing of me with a crown taped to the fridge. Some people wait a lifetime to be seen. I waited 70 years, and now? I had company. It was my 71st birthday this time, and this time I did not bake my own cake. Elena did. Lemon sponge with whipped cream frosting, light, sweet, and a little tangy, just how I liked it. She even asked for my old recipe cards, said she wanted to get it right. And she did. The house was full again, not crowded, not chaotic, just full. Full of people who wanted to be there. Richard was in the kitchen, carving the roast. Alina was setting out extra plates. Sammy, now taller and quieter, helped with the drinks. And Emmy, sweet Emmy, with her big eyes and even bigger heart, clutched a tiny box of matches like it was treasure. "Grandma," she whispered, tugging my sleeve, "can I light the candles?" I smiled. "Of course you can. They're yours to light." She carefully placed the candles, 7 small ones and 1 tall gold taper, in the center. Just like last year, except this time the room wasn't dark. This time it was bright, with voices, laughter, and the smell of dinner warming in the oven. As Emmy lit the last candle, she began singing. Not in perfect pitch, not in a performance voice, but with heart, with little hands clapping and a smile wide enough to break your heart. "Happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Grandma." Everyone joined in. Even Sammy, though I noticed he sang softly, watching me with that look children get when they're starting to understand who really loves them. I blew out the candles with a quiet breath. The room erupted in cheers. Emmy wrapped her arms around my waist, giggling. "Did you wish for something?" she asked. "No," I said, smoothing her hair. "I already have it." Richard came up beside me. He looked older now, not in years but in weight, like the past year had aged something in him that could never go back to boyhood. And maybe that was good. "Mom," he said, gently. "I'm sorry last year," I held up a hand. "Not tonight. Tonight we start over." He nodded. His eyes were glassy. He kissed my cheek. After cake, they gave me a gift. A photo album. Handmade, brown leather, gold-trimmed corners. Inside were new memories, Emmy's drawings, pictures of Sammy playing soccer, a photo of me in the garden, one of Richard fixing the porch railing, one of all of us at the beach from last summer. And the last page, it held a single line in Elena's handwriting. "This family sees you, always." I closed the book and held it to my chest. Years ago, I would have given anything for a night like this. I would have traded all my silence, all my waiting, just for a moment of being seen, truly seen. But I suppose life doesn't give you things when you want them. It gives them when you are finally ready to receive them. As the evening wound down, Emmy curled up beside me on the couch, her head resting against my shoulder. "Grandma," she said, "do people get second chances?" I looked down at her, this little light who had entered my life with no warning and no demands, just love. "Yes, sweetheart, they do, if they choose to." She thought about that for a long while, then whispered, "I'm glad you got yours." I kissed her forehead. "So am I." The house quieted as the night wore on. Dishes clinked in the sink. Sammy and Richard debated which movie to put on. Elena brought me tea in my husband's old cup, the one she had polished just for tonight. And me? I sat there, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of lavender and lemon cake, with a heart full of something I hadn't had in years. Peace. Not revenge, not triumph, just peace. The kind that comes after the truth has been told and heard. The kind that settles into your bones and whispers, "You were never wrong to love." Because I did love, even when they forgot me. Even when they erased me from their photos and their plans. Even when I was just wallpaper. But tonight, I was more than a wallflower. I was the center of the room. I was a grandmother, seen, cherished, and finally celebrated. And that was the only wish I had ever made. And it came true, with one gold candle still glowing. They left me with the cake and candles, but I lit the truth. And when they brought lies to my table, I served them justice. Subscribe for more Grandma True stories, because silence may be golden, but wisdom, that speaks loud.